Please go ahead, Ambassador. And please could everyone start renaming themselves in line with their respective mission or their organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, dear friends of the Safe School Declaration, it's a pleasure to see you here today. Before I say anything more, I would like to give the floor to the interpreters for some important information. Interpreters, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Moses, one of your interpreters. This meeting has interpretation services available at the bottom of your screen. Once the interpretation function will have been activated, you will see an icon at the bottom of your screen. Please click on the icon and then choose your desired language, either English, French, or Spanish. And once you do that, you mute the original language. You also have an option of muting the original language. And by doing that, you will have access to interpretation services for the meeting. I wish you a fruitful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And now that this is sorted out, let me again welcome you to this virtual event in celebration of the Safe Schools Declaration's 6th anniversary, where you will also get to learn about the 4th International Safe Schools Conference that will take place in Abuja, Nigeria in October. This event is a collaboration between the missions of Argentina, Nigeria, Spain, and Norway, as well as Italy, the Geneva Safe Schools Declaration Core Group, the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack, and Save the Children. My name is Tine Mørk-Smith. I'm the ambassador of Norway here in Geneva, and I will be your moderator today. Please be aware that the session is being interpreted, as we've already heard, to French, Spanish, and English, and that you can select the language as you've already been instructed. And to help our interpreters, and I will try to be a good example, please do not speak too fast. And please, interpreters, tell us if that happens. On this day, 6 years ago, the Oslo Conference on Safe Schools was officially opened. The conference lasted for 2 days and concluded with the launch of the declaration that you all know. It was a quick, but by no means an easy birth. The negotiation process took less than half a year, but the opposition was strong. The attempts to water down the text were numerous, often combined with the argument that a weaker text would enable more states to join. This is an argument that we've heard on many occasions. The core group, at that time consisting of Argentina, Austria, Cote d'Ivoire, Jordan, New Zealand, Nigeria, Norway, Spain, and the Philippines, felt differently. We opted to have a strong text and work on endorsements over time. And so it was. On the 29th of May, 2015, 37 states endorsed a strong declaration with tangible commitments to end military use of schools and protect education from attacks. 6 years later, that number has nearly tripled, including many of the original skeptics. We've come a long way. 108 states have now endorsed the declaration. The issue of access to safe education has caught the attention of the world, but this is no time for complacency. Attacks on education are prolific, military use of schools continues around the world, and COVID has compounded the problem. We must now go beyond endorsements and work on concrete implementation of the declaration. So thank you all for investing your time in this issue and for being with us here today. Before I give the floor to our panelists, I would like to start with some housekeeping matters.
Ambassador, you're muted.
So sorry, when did I stop? Can I start again on the housekeeping rules?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Before I give the floor to our panelists, I would like to start with some housekeeping matters that I believe you are quite aware of by now. Please be aware that this session is being live streamed on the GCPEA web pages. Second, please turn off your cameras and microphones unless speaking. Third, please use the chat to indicate if you would like to speak or ask questions during the Q&A. I will not have the possibility to see raised hands, so let's focus on the chat. We will start with an informative session on the Abuja conference with 3 short presentations, followed by a 15-minute Q&A. There are some here that hasn't turned off their microphones, so if please everybody could check, I would appreciate that. And in the Q&A, you can ask questions you might have relating to the upcoming conference. Thereafter, we will have a thematic session on the declaration with 3 short presentations, followed by another Q&A. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to today's first speaker. This is the Ambassador of Nigeria here in Geneva, His Excellency, Mr. Abidun Richards Adejola. Mr. Adejola will provide us with an overview of the conference, objective, themes, and modalities for participation. Ambassador Adejola, you have the floor.
Thank you so very much, Excellency. Ambassador, I truly appreciate and also to commend your strident efforts going forward.
Excellent, yeah.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my very first word today is that of thanks and appreciation to all the co-organizers for all the strident efforts we have all put in place to ensure the success of the event in October. To all participants, I should also like to say that your presence is a promising sign of the growing interest across the globe to address the menace faced by one of the most vulnerable populations today, that is the school children. It has been 6 years, we all know, since the adoption of the Safe School Declaration in Oslo, Norway. But also this afternoon is an opportunity to seize to congratulate all stakeholders of that declaration as we commemorate the 6th anniversary. Evidently, a period spanning 5 years, more than 5 years and above, demands very studious review of the progress we have made to ensure that we hold ourselves accountable while also advancing commitments in the call for a holistic implementation of that declaration. Excellencies, friends, the next stock-taking event has been scheduled, as we have heard from Ambassador Smith just now, has been scheduled to take place on the continent of Africa, particularly in Nigeria, a country that has been directly affected and impacted by various forms of attack on education. And this is, of course, pursuant to what we have all witnessed and experienced at the 2nd and 3rd international conferences on safe schools held both in Argentina and Spain. So for further information, I should like to stress that the Abuja conference, which is scheduled to hold between 25th to 27th October this year, is an opportunity for states at multilateral and bilateral levels, including civil society organizations, to exchange experiences, learning, and share strategies on progress and challenges we have encountered in implementing the Safe School Declaration. It is often said that designing good policies is only as good as the implementation of those policies. So to move us beyond the realm of endorsement and expression of political commitment, and to encourage states to accelerate the implementation of Safe School Declaration, I'm glad to inform that the Abuja conference will largely focus on following deliverables. One, it's to provide a conducive platform for member states and civil society organizations, as I said earlier, to share good practices in implementing that declaration and inspire other states to adopt context-specific approaches. We've been told that we have right now 108 states that have endorsed that declaration, and others would appreciate coming together with us. And then secondly, to bring together all ministries of education, defense, justice, foreign affairs, and other pertinent organizations to identify the prevention and response measures and forge global cooperation and strengthen coordination in protecting education and deterring military use of schools and universities. And finally, also to identify key actions needed by governments to strengthen international and national legal mechanisms, as well as to provide justice and accountability for victims of attacks on education. And to achieve these objectives, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there will be 3 panel discussions to be organized on key themes. The focus will be on building community resilience, ending military use of schools and universities, and to strengthen accountability mechanisms. And selected sub-themes also will center on a wide intersectional analysis of violations within the school context, such as sexual violence, child recruitment, abductions, killings, and attacks on all educational facilities. And speakers at the event will be strategically selected to reflect varying challenges and lessons for countries and regions to draw on. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, while the growing number of states have endorsed the declaration is commendable, we truly appreciate that. There is the overarching need for us to further provide protection for and make schools and our universities in conflict situations a universal priority. And in this regard, efforts must be tailored, all our efforts and our attempts must be tailored towards encouraging all UN member states to endorse this declaration. In Abuja, 2 sessions of the event will be dedicated to sharing experiences on the implementation of that declaration, that is from military and regional perspectives. And the event will also bring together school children, victims of attack on education, teachers, and other persons and personnel who have been directly impacted. Also included in the program are side events organized by civil society organizations and children. And the conference, which we have now learned will be co-hosted by the African Union Commission, promises to showcase a broad hybrid format. Is of course, because of what we all going through, the restrictions and the protocols. So it will be a format, the format will be that of hybrid to accommodate all participants with in-person and virtual components. Those will be available. While a limited number of participants from Nigeria, including the speakers, will attend the conference in person, that's the plans going forward. Virtual login is recommended for all others, including international participants. And to ensure very wide virtual participation, arrangements are right now ongoing to locate viewing hubs in Nigerian embassies, as well as embassies of co-hosts in some selected countries with limited internet services. But I should also like to say that further details on logistics will be available on the conference website in the coming weeks. To conclude, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I should like to also reiterate that international commitment, cooperation, and solidarity are crucial elements needed to address this very ugly trend capable of undermining global efforts, and as we all make very strident efforts to build a better world for all. And to finally conclude, a save the date invitation will be sent to all nations in coming days. And I want to seize the opportunity finally to welcome you all in advance to that conference in Abuja. I thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think that you have given us a lot of information about the conference now, and I will be interested to see if there are further questions when we get to the Q&A session later. But let me also use this opportunity to congratulate you both on what you've already done on the implementation on your own side, but also on the choice to make this a virtual conference already, because it makes the preparation easier, and also the hybrid version will make it possible for many to attend. So we're very much looking forward to that. And this was not foreseen when we were planning for the conference originally. So there's a lot of flexibility that has been shown in the preparations here. I now have the pleasure to pass the microphone to Her Excellency Mrs. Aurora Díaz Rato Revuelta, the Ambassador of Spain here in Geneva. Aurora, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Tina. And I wonder if there's an interpretation to Spanish working, because I've done my intervention in Spanish. So I'll try in Spanish, and otherwise I'll have to do some simultaneous translation myself. Okay. Bueno, es un placer estar aquí con todos vosotros para conmemorar el 6º aniversario de la Declaración de Escuelas Seguras y poder compartir este panel con Nigeria, que nos tiene por delante el enorme desafío de organizar la 4ª conferencia y para la que desde ya le ofrecemos todo nuestro apoyo. Is there an
Is the Spanish interpreters here?
Compartir con todos ustedes las principales conclusiones que alcanzamos entonces, en la idea de que con ellas podamos ir concretando los esfuerzos que tenemos que realizar para afrontar los principales desafíos con los que se encuentra la educación en conflicto y asegurar una correcta coordinación de nuestras acciones, ya sea políticas o operativas. La conferencia de Palma, como saben, se celebró en mayo de 2018 y contó con la participación...
Aurora, excuse me, I think we have a problem with interpretation. Is it possible to fix the interpretation?
If it's not possible, I'll put it in English, but excuse my the difficulty in translating at the same time. Okay.
But let's have a quick check with the interpretation. Is it possible to get it in English?
Moses, are you on?
You have to facilitate the device. It has not been
I'm on, but I'm not getting from the Spanish colleagues. I'm supposed to get from Spanish colleagues. I'm not getting.
Okay. I think we have a problem. Aurora, I think I will have to ask you to just move on and do it in English if it's okay with you.
No problem. No problem whatsoever. Okay. Just I was saying that we grant our support, total support to Nigeria, who's organizing the next conference. And the idea of today's intervention is to share our experience while celebrating the previous one and share the conclusions that we all got there in order to try and facilitate to move on to the new coordination of our actions, be them political or operative in the future. The Conference of Palma took place, as you very well know, in May 2018, and by then we were 80 states, 35 organizations of the system of UN, civil society and academia. At that time, we were 91 states, those who had endorsed the declaration, and now we are 108. So some advances have been done, even be it in numbers. The discussions were around 3 critical subjects. The first one to be discussed was the gendered impact of attacks on education and of military use of educational facilities. Women and girls are often targeted in attacks by groups that oppose education for girls. They may also be subject to specific forms of attack, such as rape, abduction, or recruitment while at school or on the way to school and from educational facilities. Even when women and girls are not specifically targeted because of their gender, the long-term consequences for women and girls can be different, and they are often the first to drop out of school and the last to return. The importance of implementing the Safe School Declaration in a gender-responsive manner was underscored as a conclusion of this conference. Another interesting debate that took place was focused on women's gaining access to high-level policy positions and how they are often named to ministries of education, as well as of the importance of women taking on high-profile appointments and of ministers of education actually becoming a high-profile appointment to provide education with the means and prestige that it deserves, especially in conflict-ridden countries. Special emphasis was then placed on generating synergies between different agendas, such as the WPS agenda and the achievement of the SDGs. Second area was the need to improve monitoring and reporting of attacks on education to inform prevention, mitigation, and accountability mechanisms. This was emphasized at the conference, together with the systematic and the need for systematic and reliable data on attack against students, teachers, and education centers, which was thought to be essential for adopting effective prevention and response measures for bringing those responsible for attacks to justice, which is key, and providing assistance to victims. There were a number of challenges. It was accorded to collecting data on attacks on education. Perhaps the most obvious is the lack of an agreed definition of an attack on education. Moreover, there is no comprehensive and systematic mechanism for reporting these violations. Another significant challenge includes limited technical capacity, few financial resources, and difficulties in accessing conflict zones where attacks on education occur. Positive recommendations were also made on linking agendas, on using the synergies offered by different monitoring and research mechanisms in other areas, such as WHO or the UN Security Council's Agenda on Children and Armed Conflict. As regards accountability and combating impunity, another of the challenges identified, the efforts being made by the International Criminal Court were highlighted with a focus on guaranteeing compliance with international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Although the primary responsibility falls to the state, active collaboration is essential amongst the states, the UN, and the ICC. Thirdly, and that was that's the last one I'm going to refer to, participants discussed practical implementation of the guidelines for protecting schools and universities from military use during armed conflicts. It was highlighted the need for coordination among ministries of defense, education, interior, and foreign affairs in order for the guidelines to be effectively incorporated into states' operational military manuals, policies, and legislation. The session also underscored the importance of engaging with non-state armed actors so they are familiar with the guidelines and integrate them into the military rules. We very much hope that this agenda will be brought to success, and we wish all the best to our Nigerian colleagues in that endeavor. Thank you very much, Tina.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Ambassador, for sharing the experiences from Palma with us, both with your talk about accountability and also about gender responsiveness is very important for the way forward. Also, thank you for your flexibility with regards to being your own interpreter. I just wanted to check before I move on, are we doing okay with interpretation now? I see there are a lot of questions in the chat.
No, Tina, the Spanish interpretation is still not on, and we don't know exactly why, but the French seems to be working. So we're working behind the scenes there to try and see if we can get this back on.
There's an icon that has to be put to enable the interpreter to do 2 languages.
Can the interpreter please put his video on so we know who you are?
Is it okay if I move on and you will work on in the sidelines? I will now speak English for a minute maybe, and then you will see if you can change. And I think that the next couple of speakers will be English speakers, but of course that's not a good answer for our Spanish.
Since there are 2 Spanish interpreters, let me take over. The other interpreter seems to have a technical problem. While it is sorted out, I will take over the interpretation.
Thank you so much for your flexibility, and I hope everything will be sorted out. Okay, so let me just say a couple of more words about what we just heard. I think that what we've heard is that there's a clear line between what happened in Palma and the preparation that is being done for the meeting in Abuja. So I think that we have some clear points to follow up here when we continue on the implementation track. But let me also use this opportunity to congratulate you, Aurora, on the very successful training program that was inaugurated in February, and the fact that it was virtual. It was quite impressive, and for us, from the Norwegian side, we have decided to establish a state-to-state implementation network that will be officially launched in Abuja. So these different efforts, I think, complement each other well, and I'm happy for the cooperation that we continue to have here in Geneva on this issue. The next point on our agenda is to go back to the GCPAA, and the GCPAA has been closely involved in the planning of all 4 international conferences. And I think what we will hear now from the Executive Director, Mrs. Dia Giordana, is that she will give us some recommendations on how we can prepare for the conference in order to maximize its impact. She will also give us a few highlights on the impact of Safe School Declaration relative to the themes of the Abuja conference. Mrs. Giordana, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Dear distinguished guests, it really is a great pleasure to speak with you today about the Abuja conference. The theme of the conference is ensuring safe education for all, from commitment to practice. And this reflects the overarching aim of the conference, which really is to highlight good practice in implementing the commitments in the declaration, so that states are not only inspired to take action, but have models for doing so, which they can adapt to their own context. And there already has been considerable good practice to draw upon. One of the key commitments that the conference will focus on is using the guidelines for protecting schools and universities from military use during armed conflict to restrict schools from being used as barracks and bases, weapons stores, and training grounds. In the last 6 years, over a dozen countries have revised their national policies and practices or their military manuals to reduce military use of educational facilities. For example, last year, the Central African Republic criminalized the occupation of schools on the same terms as an attack on a school. And in the context of the pandemic, last August, Mali's then education minister wrote to the Defense Ministry to remind the armed forces of their commitments under the Safe Schools Declaration to avoid using any school currently vacant due to COVID-19. Another key commitment to be highlighted at the conference is ensuring the continuation of education during armed conflict. And there's good practice here too. In May last year in Burkina Faso, the Minister of Education announced that distance learning introduced due to COVID-19 would extend to students affected by conflict in collaboration with UNICEF, UNESCO, and regional bodies. And in Nigeria last year, the Education and Emergencies Working Group finalized the Safe Schools Declaration Security Agency's Trainers Manual and Facilitators Guide. Assessment forms are being piloted to provide a checklist to guide decisions about when to open and to close or reopen schools in conflict-affected states. Investigating allegations of violations or attacks on education, and where appropriately, duly prosecuting perpetrators is another declaration commitment that will be explored at the conference. Kenya, for example, has made progress in this regard. In 2019, over 4 years after Al-Shabaab gunmen stormed Garissa University College, a Kenyan court convicted 3 men who were accused of crimes in connection with the deadly attack. And following up on the conference in Spain, where collecting data was highlighted, that is a commitment in the declaration that really forms the foundation of all the other commitments. And there have been advances here too. In the Ukraine, the education cluster and its partners are continuing to support the government to finalize and endorse a Safe Schools Declaration implementation plan, which includes the establishment of a monitoring and reporting mechanism. And GCP has also released a toolkit for collecting and analyzing data on attacks on education, which governments and organizations can use to strengthen the data they collect and ultimately use to inform their policies and programs to prevent and respond to attacks on education. Good practice such as this will be highlighted at the conference, but what we have gathered represents only a small part of the excellent work that's being done across the globe, particularly in conflict-affected areas. Ahead of the conference, we encourage you to share good practice you're already carrying out, but also to accelerate your efforts. A website will be launched ahead of the conference where good practice can be shared, and these examples of successful measures will also be included in GCP's implementation resource bank on our website, which anyone can access to learn about ways in which the declaration has led to concrete protections and how to implement that in your own context. In addition to sharing strategies for implementing declaration commitments, there are other ways in which you can support the conference and mobilize action on the declaration. Of course, please encourage delegates from your ministries of education, defense, foreign affairs, and justice to attend the conference virtually, and your ambassadors or embassy staff in Nigeria to participate in person. Please also conduct outreach to other states to encourage them to attend. In particular, it may be useful for ministries of defense to speak to their peers to encourage them to participate, including in countries that have not yet endorsed the Safe Schools Declaration. Please raise the visibility of the declaration and the conference by referencing both in Security Council debates and Human Rights Council sessions and other relevant events and fora. The Children in Armed Conflict debate next month is an obvious place to start. Please also highlight the conference at events and in media related to the UN International Day to Protect Education from Attack on September 9th, which will just be a little bit ahead of the conference and a real moment to galvanize attention on this issue. The 4th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration provides a significant global moment to focus attention on the widespread nature of attacks on education and the devastating impact that they cause, while providing concrete examples of what can be done to end these attacks. We count on your support to use this moment to mobilize more states to endorse the declaration and adopt legislation, policies, and practices that will entrench their commitments and affect real change for students and educators and the societies they build in conflict-affected communities around the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dia, and thank you for telling us on what we need to focus on in order to strengthen the implementation, but also giving us some good practices and things that have already happened that we can build on going forward. I think that's a positive approach, but as I also said in my introductory remarks, we still have a lot of work to do, and you had given us some good ideas on how we could work together to continue to get more endorsements. We are now moving into a Q&A session, and the idea is that if you have questions to the panelists that have now spoken, both with regards to what we just heard about best practices, experiences from Palma, but also practical questions about the Abuja conference, please put them in the chat. Before I have a look in the chat, if there are questions, I know that we have the Permanent Mission of Switzerland here who have asked for the floor. So Mrs. Flynn Fröhlich, could I please ask you to take the microphone?
Yes, thank you, Ambassador. Excellencies, dear colleagues, we thank the permanent missions of Argentina, Nigeria, Norway, and Spain to the UN in Geneva, as well as the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack and Save the Children for holding this important event as we mark the 6th anniversary of the Safe Schools Declaration. Education is an essential tool to provide both physical and psychological protection to girls and boys from the most devastating effects of crisis or conflict, and it contributes to their longer-term perspectives. As one of the 108 states that have endorsed the Safe Schools Declaration, Switzerland encourages those countries which have not yet done so to endorse it, and those who have to fully implement it. In this context, we would like to reiterate the following points. It is of utmost importance to continue protecting schools and students from attack. The Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack has registered over 11,000 direct attacks on schools, and over 22,000 students, teachers, and school personnel are reported to have been killed, injured, abducted, or detained between 2015 and 2019. Switzerland urges armed forces and armed groups to refrain from carrying out such attacks and from using schools and universities for military purposes. Switzerland is also strongly engaged in making schools safer. First, we are working to increase global engagement towards education in emergencies, and we are active both at the operational level in affected countries as well as at the global level. In an effort to step up engagement in education in emergencies, in January this year, Switzerland launched the Geneva Global Hub for Education in Emergencies. The hub already counts 22 members with concrete activities underway to enhance the visibility of this issue in international Geneva, as well as create intersectoral synergies and ultimately support more coherent and impactful education and emergency interventions in affected countries. Second, we recently finalized a new study on measuring school-based security interventions to protect schools from external threats of conflict and violence. This study conducted a mapping of the different measurement frameworks and tools, as well as an analysis. Finally, we would like to reiterate the importance of the forthcoming Abuja conference in strengthening our collective efforts to protect children from situations of crisis and conflict. Please be assured of Switzerland's full support to the Safe Schools Declaration. We are very much looking forward to the conference in October. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Froelich, and thank you for sharing the good results that you have from your survey with us. That's very useful. I now have the next speaker, which will be education about all who has asked for the floor. But I have also, just so that you know that that I've seen you, I have Mexico, EU, and Luxembourg after that. So, but I will start with education about all, and please go ahead, Mrs. Malaya Malik, Executive Director, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Your Excellencies, GCPA. I just want to start by saying what a fantastic moment this is. 6 years of the Safe Schools Declaration. As a foundation committed to the rule of law and international law, and personally as a lawyer, it gives me such pleasure to see a global norm being established in such a short period of time. And I think we have so many people to thank for that, notably countries such as those that have led on the declaration, that are present here on the panel today, crucially GCPA, and also in particular the leadership of those such as the present Executive Director, Dia, who's spoken today, who's ensured that it's really absolutely remarkable what's taken place and what a success story the SSD has been. I don't think we should be complacent. I think that we should move forward, particularly in the very practical ways that Spain and Dia have identified. So in handing the baton over to Nigeria, I think there's a fair bit of work to do. In particular, we still see, both globally, but also within the specific region of Nigeria, new ways in which education is being attacked, and particularly worrying for my foundation, which has a huge amount of investment in education in Western Africa and in the Sahel region, is this new phenomenon of recurring attacks, kidnapping, abduction of teachers and school children, which I hope we can discuss when we're in Nigeria. I just wanted to also look forward and say that education above all and the state of Qatar were crucial in establishing the 9th of September as an international day to protect education from attack. We felt it was important to have an annual mobilizing moment around which all of us can come together and ensure that there's leadership and global advocacy on this issue. So looking forward to this 9th of September 2021, which is about a month before Nigeria, I invite all colleagues, member states, to please work with us to ensure that the 9th of September 2021, which is the second observance of the International Day to Protect Education from Attack, is a real moment the way we unite to protect education. And we'll be getting in touch with all of you to make clear how you can support us. But I think today we just have to celebrate 6 years of the Safe Schools Declaration. Thank all the member states represented today for their leadership and GCPA. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. If I understand the chat correctly, there are some technical problems now. I hope it's being sorted out so that we can continue. The next speaker on my list is Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. I understand that the Spanish interpretation is working now, so I will switch into Spanish. Permítame primero expresar nuestro agradecimiento por organizar esta importante sesión informativa hacia la cuarta conferencia internacional sobre la Declaración de Escuelas Seguras. México reafirma su apoyo a la protección y defensa de los intereses superiores de la niñez en toda circunstancia. La protección de la niñez en los conflictos armados es uno de los temas prioritarios promovidos por México durante su actual participación como miembro electo del Consejo de Seguridad para el periodo 2021-2022. Nos preocupa el alarmante número de ataques a escuelas que figura en el informe del secretario general sobre este tema. Consciente de la importancia de proteger la infraestructura esencial y promover no se utilicen con fines militares o como blanco de ataques, de conformidad con el derecho internacional humanitario, México se adhirió recientemente a la Declaración de Escuelas Seguras e invita a otros estados a hacerlo también. Agradecemos a la señora Dia Niyone, directora de la Coalición Global para Proteger la Educación a los Ataques, por la carta que dirigió a nuestro ministro de Relaciones Exteriores para reconocer el respaldo de México a la Declaración de Escuelas Seguras, siendo el país número 108 en hacerlo. México insta a todas las partes en conflicto a respetar las obligaciones derivadas del derecho internacional, así como el llamado al cese al fuego por parte del secretario general de la ONU para enfrentar la pandemia global y así prevenir ataques a escuelas y el personal médico, así como permitir el acceso a la asistencia humanitaria y sanitaria para los niños. Muchas gracias, embajadora.
Q&A after that. So just so that you're aware that I will now concentrate on the two next speakers, which will be the European Union and Luxembourg. European Union, you have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much to the organizers for organizing this very important event. And the EU remains strongly committed to facilitate access to education and ensure that children continue to learn. And we champion education to play its full role in the healthy physical, cognitive, and psychosocial development of children and young people. This is why the EU continues to dedicate 10% of our humanitarian aid budget to education and emergencies. Protection of education against attack is a cornerstone of the EU's education and emergencies interventions through IHL advocacy and funding for protective measures. As such, we support the rollout of the Safe Schools Declaration through our advocacy and funding. We are keen to engage further on peer-to-peer exchanges and collaboration on regional and global levels. And we look forward to the discussion and sharing of good practices in protecting schools and education, leading to the international conference in Abuja. Now, I have one question, and it's how non-state entities can engage further on the preparation of the conference in Abuja. That will be all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, European Union. I now give the floor to Luxembourg. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank in the first place Norway and Argentina for the leadership on this issue, but also Spain and Nigeria, which is hosting the next international conference. As you know, Luxembourg has always been very supportive of the children and armed conflict agenda. The resolution 2143, which we had adopted in 2014 when Luxembourg was chairing the working group on children and armed conflict of the Security Council, was the first resolution to have an article, a paragraph on concrete steps to protect schools from attacks. So just a piece of information to let you know that we will be organizing together with GCPEA regional consultations before the conference in Nigeria. These will be consultations for Eurasia, meaning European states and Central Asian states. We are organizing this right now. So what I can share with you is that the tentative date for these regional consultations will be on the 2nd of July. We will send out, of course, together with GCPEA, invitations for these regional consultations. And we will be aiming to have more or less 40 states, endorsing states from Europe and Asia. And the aim of these consultations will be to learn from the endorsing states what their priorities are, and also to broaden the support of the Safe Schools Declaration. So you will hear very soon from us in the near future about these regional consultations, and looking forward to the international conference in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Can I ask you, Christian, because I saw there were some written questions in the chat, could you please just quickly summarize the questions that we've seen in the chat?
Sure, absolutely. There's one relating to conference participation. Is there a way to register to participate virtually in the conference in Abuja in October? That's one question. And then there's a question more thematic, I suppose. We can maybe save that for the next debate, but how we can assist states in implementing the Safe Schools Declaration. But then let's see, another one on participation at the conference, how participation of children is planned to ensure that their voices are highlighted and can influence conclusions. Does the agenda take into account side events? Can we know more about this? That's the two on the conference for now.
Thank you so much, Christian. I will then go quickly back to the panel, and I will start with you, Ambassador Adejola, who I think maybe most of the questions were directed to. Do you have some comments or answers to what we've heard?
Okay. Thank you so very much, Excellency. Indeed, that is quite true, because it's quite right to ensure that we provide those details on time. And you will recall that in my presentation, I did say that the logistics will be available regarding the conference and the website in the coming weeks. We are actually working together with Abuja, and then, but we've been assured that it won't take time. And you will also recall that I mentioned, I highlighted the fact that we'll be pushing out save the dates notices in the coming days. We're working with in that regard. We're working with Addis Ababa. And then for now, in fact, I'm in contact with the Office of the Commissioner, Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the AU Commission. They're right now in, I think, Mombasa. So, but surely I'm working with them to ensure that we get that part sorted quickly, while the one for the virtual login and then the associated technicalities will be made available to us as soon as possible. I think, I hope I touched a couple of
that was excellent. Thank you so much. And in the interest of time, I'm now planning to move to the next panel. But just so you know, we will try to pick up on some of the questions in the next session. And also, I want to use this occasion to thank all the interventions that we've had already, and also the panelists in the first panel for their active engagement on this issue. We will now move to the second panel, which is key messages and progress as we mark the 6th anniversary of the declaration. The actual day is tomorrow, and with 108 endorsements today, we have made strides. But endorsing is, of course, only the beginning. So following through, as we've mentioned already several times today, is what will make a difference. So this is also the main theme of the Abuja conference, and also the focus in this session to mark the 6th year anniversary. So we have a panel of 3 speakers, 2 of whom will talk to us about the efforts to implement the declaration on the international, regional, and national levels. Our third distinguished speaker will give us a reminder on why we have the Safe Schools Declaration, and she will also talk to us about the impact that attacks on education has for those affected. And after the presentations, I will do as we did on the first panel. I will open for some questions and comments. It's then my pleasure to pass the floor first to Mr. Gianluca Alberini, who is the Director for United Nations and Human Rights at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy. You have the floor, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's indeed a pleasure to intervene today to celebrate the 6th anniversary of the Safe School Declaration, which has become in such a short period of time a reference point for everybody, and especially for us, state and non-state actors committed to strengthen the respect of international humanitarian law and the rights of the children. Let me thank the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attacks, as well as Argentina, Spain, and Norway for organizing the event and for the long-standing engagement to promote the declaration, and Nigeria for the commitment to organize the forthcoming 4th Safe School Conference in Abuja next October. which will mark another key moment in the global efforts to implement the declaration. This year's report of the Secretary General, the UN Secretary General on the protection of civilians in armed conflict is a stark reminder of the huge impact of COVID-19 and the related restrictive measures on children affected by armed conflict in terms of access to education, healthcare, and social services. School closures have had and continue to have a detrimental effect on millions of children worldwide, increasing the risk of child, early and forced marriage, adolescent pregnancies, sexual exploitation, and abuse and recruitment into armed groups. As we all know, these violations often also have a long-lasting impact on children's physical and psychological development and undermine their ability to actively shape their future. Italy is strongly engaged in raising awareness and promoting action to combat all forms of violations against children in armed conflict. On the occasion of the 33rd International Conference of the Red Cross and Crescent in 2019, we presented an open pledge to call on all actors to undertake all the appropriate and necessary actions to reduce the impact of war on the life of children. This includes promoting the widest possible support to the Safe School Declaration in order to mitigate to the maximum possible extent the consequences of armed conflicts on education, on students, education personnel, and school infrastructures. We also believe it is necessary to apply a gender perspective to the issue. Why? Because children affected by armed conflicts are indeed particularly at risk of experiencing harsh and brutal form of violence, as well as to drop out of education. This is why in the latest session of the Commission on the Status of Women, we hosted a high-level side event on accountability for violence against children in armed conflicts. And we also decided to pay specific attention to children, particularly girls, within the implementation of the Italian National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. We all know the Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace and Security. In light of the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Conference, which is the World Conference on Women, and within the framework of the mentioned Security Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace and Security, Italy released its fourth National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. To develop this national plan, we intensively worked through a specifically established open-ended working group led by the Italian ministerial authorities, the Committee for Human Rights, with involvement of relevant stakeholders, including civil society organizations, academia, and trade unions, with a fully inclusive approach. The goal was to streamline the previous national plan, taking into account all relevant international and regional standards, including the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly goal number 5 on gender equality, and goal number 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions, as well the CEDAW Convention and the CEDAW's Committee's General Recommendation 30 on Women in Conflict Prevention, conflict and post-conflict situations. Along these lines, by considering the 3P of the Women and Peace Security Agenda, the 3P refer to prevention, protection, and participation, a special reference to children, and in particular girls, is mainstreamed within the entire plan in order to reconcile the spirit of the Agenda 1325 and Italy's specific commitment on children involved in armed conflict. The third objective of our plan is focused entirely on promoting gender equality, empowerment, and protection of women and children, especially girls and young women, as well as respect for human rights of women and children, especially girls in conflict and post-conflict areas. This includes a number of measures specifically dedicated also to girls and girls' children that will be implemented by different national administrations. I just mentioned a few. Responding to violence against children, in particular girls, in emergency, conflict, and post-conflict situations, also by enhancing the expertise of the police and security forces, as well as the judicial institutions. Another action is the promoting the rehabilitation and empowerment of child survivors, particularly girl child survivors living in conflict and post-conflict situation. The third example is promoting the involvement of the private sector, also on the basis of the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, to help children that are conflict and post-conflict survivors in order to ensure their enjoyment of human rights, safety, physical and mental health, well-being, economic security, and equality. These measures should be seen as a part of our general approach that considers continued access to education, also during armed conflicts, as an essential component to foster women empowerment and women's full participation in all spheres of society, but also, more in general, a powerful tool to promote future peace and prevent wars. In conclusion, let me quote Article 29 of the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, which is the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history, which reminds us that education should and could aim at preparing the child for responsible life in a free society, in the spirit of understanding, peace, tolerance, equality of sexes, and friendship among all peoples. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Director Alberini, and thank you for all that Italy has done on this issue. I particularly found interesting now the links to the overall protection agenda, both on women, peace and security, on children in armed conflict. It really shows that we have to work on this from a comprehensive perspective. So thank you for both ideas and good introduction to this issue. We will now move to the next speaker in the second panel. That is Dr. Remember Myagmini. Dr. Myagmini is the Child Protection Advisor at the Peace and Security Department of the African Union Commission, and where he focuses on promoting knowledge and policies that advance the protection of children affected by armed conflict. He will talk to us about AU policy to advance the implementation of the Safe Schools Declaration, including the recent adoption of the AU Doctrine on Peace Support Operation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me, on behalf of the Commissioner, Political Affairs, Peace and Security, His Excellency Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, to thank you very much for inviting the African Union to this very important event and to make brief remarks. Allow me to start by what we are already fully aware of, that Africa still remains the continent with the highest number of active conflict. Not only is Africa experiencing high number of active conflicts, these conflicts are becoming increasingly nasty and brutal. And therefore, the complex nature of this conflict includes, and we have witnessed at the African Union, an increased attacks on schools. And as we are all aware, since we started documenting attacks on schools at the international level, 3,500 of the 11,000 attacks that has been reported on schools and places of learning took place in Africa. And therefore, the African Union approach to dealing with the issues of attack on schools and places of learning is in two-pronged. Number one, we, as the African Union, committed to an agenda of silencing the guns, because we believe that until conflicts are prevented, managed, and resolved sustainably, We will continue to deal with the questions of attacks against schools and other serious human rights violations. And that's why silencing the gun has become an extraordinary important priority for the African Union. And if we have to silence the guns sustainably, education plays a central role in the agenda to sustainably solve and resolve conflicts in Africa. And therefore, the African Union is committed, and that's why the commitment to this event and to this declaration arises from, because access, safe access to education is a central pillar for us in terms of preventing conflict sustainably. And what the African Union has done, and I think that we are happy to share, is, as we all know, the declaration is a declaration, and as a lawyer, it is persuasive nature, remain to a large extent on the goodwill of states to endorse. And what the African Union has done is to translate some of the commitments within the declaration into binding documents. And these binding documents includes the binding decision of the Peace and Security Council. Almost 16 decisions has been taken by the African Union Peace and Security Council on attacks on schools. In addition to the decisions of our policy organs, the African Union has also incorporated the principles of the declaration into its peace support operation, which have just been adopted by the Assembly in January of this year. That document is a binding document and commits the Union and its member states to ensure that attacks against schools are not allowed and the use of schools for military purposes are prohibited. In addition to ensuring that it is in our legal documents, the African Union has also incorporated this in the Continental Education Strategy. And this is a 10-year strategy that comes to an end in 2025. And it also incorporates a commitment from the African Union to ensuring that member states at all levels incorporate and work to ensure that these provisions are implemented. There are a number of other agencies within the African Union, the African Committee of Experts on the Right and Welfare of the Child, and the other AU agencies that have actually also made similar commitment and are monitoring a member state and asking member states to report on their commitment on this. There are a few challenges as I draw my presentation to an end. We are still working at the African Union to improve issues of implementation and coordination and resourcing to ensure that member states who have committed and are yet to commit endorse this declaration, improve their implementation, and that we put in place a monitoring and evaluation mechanism, as well as expanding access to education in internal displaced camps and refugee camps, so that education is available to children who might not have it in their original place. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for this presentation. And as the Safe School Declaration is mainly for states to, or it is for states to endorse, this shows exactly how important regional and multilateral organizations are in helping with the implementation, and also thanking you for the clear perspective on silencing the guns, on prevention as part of the way forward. So thank you so much, Dr. Miamingi. We are now moving to our final panelist in this second panel, Mrs. Palwasha Hassan, who is the director of Afghan Women's Education Center and founding member of the Afghan Women's Network. Mrs. Palwasha Hassan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I would like to congratulate all the initiators of the Safe School Declaration, that on the 6th anniversary, we have more than 100 countries endorsing this. Afghanistan is luckily one of the countries who has endorsed this declaration. but I think it's much beyond endorsement. We need much more to do to give actual safety and security to children who are going to school, and for the personnel to have a safer environment for teaching. Afghanistan, unfortunately, is one of those countries who has been in conflict for the last 40 years. And despite of remarkable progress that include 9 million children going back to school, since the fall of Taliban, where only around million children, only boys were allowed to go to school, and girls' school were totally abandoned. So unfortunately, in Afghanistan for the last 40 years, we had different way of attacks on education. And I would agree with respected ambassador from Italy that gender perspective of the school safety is also very much important, because in Afghanistan, that was also one important thing that unfortunately women and girls were the main target. Besides everyone suffering in conflict in this country. Unfortunately, this attacks against education has been going for last 40 years in different ways. Schools have been set on fire, teachers and students have been killed. And this kind of situation makes them so difficult for any child in Afghanistan to have a safer environment for education. Unfortunately, attacks against schools have been tripled in the last few years. While we are entering a peace negotiation or peace process with Taliban, and international community, especially United States, had its deal with Taliban, but safety and security for the Afghan public is still yet to come. And Afghan to really see peace and a situation where children could have a future to build. The worst attack, unfortunately, happened only few weeks from now during the holy month of Ramadan, where more than 93 kids, young girls going to school were killed, and more than 300 were wounded in one incident in capital Kabul. In another attack, which happened in one of the residential area, where 20 school children who are preparing for university exam in Logar province were killed. These are some of the closest incidents that happened in recently, but these are not the only incident. We have threats against teachers, we have school burning and restriction on schools, especially for girls all around the country. The Taliban, in theory, in the peace process, are agreeing with the girls' education now, but under the term of the Sharia law, which is a weak situation for many Afghans, because during Taliban, when they were in government, unfortunately, no girls were allowed to go to school. This is happening in Afghanistan. All these attacks are happening in a situation where we already have 3.7 million children out of school. And among those children, 60% are girls. The country's stability is hijacked by a limited group of non-state actors, Taliban, ISIS-K, and few other militant groups. A lot of time we are given the false information that probably a majority of Afghanistan community are not agreeing with school, but evidence shows that there have been a lot of change in communities, foreign distance areas, where we have male champions like Mia Khan, who would travel every day 12 kilometers on his bike to take his daughters to nearest school because we have very remote country with mountainous region and we don't have accessibility to school everywhere. So this guy would take every day his daughters to school and wait outside the school for 4 hours till they finish their classes. This is the situation. Community has changed a lot, but we still have issue with those groups who are fighting against the government. They are not allowing. And on the other hand, the government has been using school for political reason, like during election time, school has been used for election, and that is considered as one of the reasons that the school attack has been increased in that time. So I think for that reason, I will reiterate many of the recommendations which happened in the past, but also add to that that we need more government attention to ensure schools are safer, a place for children to learn and have the chance for growth. One of it is like we have an interministerial cooperation between different ministries to ensure not only the school infrastructure safety, but also to improve children's safety to go to school. Attacks on prohibit all the use of educational facilities, both for political processes, such as election, and also for military purposes by other actors. Priority should include a commitment to protect education from attacks. We have continuous attacks in Kabul, but I don't think we still have information shared with the schools, or a special measure has not been taken so far to ensure children have better safety. We still don't have a stronger format for data collection. As such, we know that throughout the country there are different attacks on schools, but not all data are centralized or analyzed in the way to take a necessary measure to avoid future attacks. On the other hand, now that Afghanistan is going through the peace process, and an international community, especially United States, is facilitating this process, it's important that children's safety, especially declaration of a safe school, should be taken as one of the humanitarian priority in this agenda. Where ceasefire is important, it's also important that certain elements, like including safety for the school, to be taken as a priority. And also, it's important for all those schools. We don't only need endorsement and maybe statement. It's also important that children and schools who have been attacked and people are suffering, that they should be given the chance to heal back, given the support that they could restart their life and education. I recently, the school situation, I give the story of Fatima, one of the girls who survived the attack, but she had to go to the same car where the dead bodies of other children with their limbs were fallen. And she cannot get out of this trauma. But unfortunately, we don't have many facility for girls like her. The resilience is tremendous among people of Afghanistan, especially girls who want to build on their career and continue their education. It's also important that we have continuous commitment for support for education, and especially girls' education in Afghanistan. So I will stop it here, and I will be happy to respond to questions if arise any later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Hassan, for your very strong statement and for giving us a clear understanding of the importance of this when it comes to the actual situations, and also our deepest condolences of the horrible attack in Kabul recently. I think it shocked us all deeply. I will move into the final Q&A session so that we have a bit of time for that before we are closing the event. I already had Nisher who have asked for the floor, so please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for giving us the floor, and the Permanent Mission of Niger is pleased to join this really important discussion. commemorating the anniversary of the Safe Schools Declaration. And we thank permanent missions of Nigeria, Argentina, Italy, Spain, and Norway to the UN in Geneva, as well as the GCPA and the Hub for organizing this. And really, Niger as a country from the Sahel, a region faced with multiple crises, we are acutely aware of the challenges of ensuring adequate access to education, particularly for girls, and particularly in areas affected by armed conflict, which is why the current president of Niger has made of education a priority, allocating nearly 25% of the national budget to education. So over the last decades, all Sahel countries have made some noticeable gains in access to education, including rural areas. However, despite all these developments, there remains a large population of out-of-school children. And now adding to that, the climate of heightened insecurity is endangering access to education in a context characterized by vulnerabilities, including humanitarian crisis and livelihood threatened by weather patterns, etc. We've seen attacks against schools have increased, where in Niger, Burkina, Mali, we've seen the number of schools closed as a result of armed conflict increase sixfold within the span of 2 years. So these attacks have really undermined years of hard-earned progress. And we see psychological effects on children. Pre-existing practices such as girl marriage could put girls at risk, and these girls are less likely to return to school. So really the consequences are clear. And what we would like to say, not to speak for too long, is that as we look to the future of our countries, if we do not tackle this education crisis, especially in conflict affected areas, then the future is jeopardized, peace is in jeopardy, there will simply be no future. Which is why Niger currently on the Security Council has made the children and armed conflict a priority of our mandate. So as you may be aware, last September, there was an open debate on the question of attacks against schools, and the GCPA briefed the Security Council under Niger's presidency, and the debate was sanctioned by the unanimous adoption of a Security Council presidential declaration on the question of attacks against schools. And it is the first time that the Safe Schools Declaration is mentioned in a United Nations Security Council presidential statement or resolution, which is a landmark. And going forward, Niger, alongside with like-minded countries, will commit to continuing to furthering the fundamental rights of children for access to education. And we thank you for the floor.
Thank you so much for your comments. And I do think that what you did in the Security Council was truly important for us and for everybody. So thank you, Mrs. Hima, for giving us that example and also telling us something about the situation in your country and your region. There seems to be one more in the chat. Someone who asks for the floor here, who's called Jack Afghanistan. Are you still interested to take the floor, sir? I don't hear anything. Christian, do you have anything else that you've seen in the chat?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Can you hear my voice? Yes, thank you very much. I'm Dr. Noor, the program director from Afghanistan, just for Afghan Capacity and Knowledge, which is the biggest implementer of education, health, emergencies, and nutrition in Afghanistan. That was very interesting discussions, and in Afghanistan, the quantities of the health schools are increased beyond negative effect of this current ongoing armed clash on the schools is. But the most important is that still the donors and also the those funds which are still fundraising in Afghanistan should focus on the qualities of these schools, the qualities of the teachings, and also quality of the materials, which still this is the gaps in Afghanistan, because when the graduation from the very far rural, deep rural areas, we have they cannot find the way to the universities from the board examinations, or Concord we say here. So it means that the quality of the schools has direct effect on these students. So my question is, how from the person or from the representative who is from Afghanistan, we focus on the qualities most than quantity, which still is a gap in Afghanistan. And we hear from the people who are in the rural and deep rural, because we have overall access in Afghanistan. We usually hear this, that focusing on the quality is more important than quantities. We have high schools in villages, which there wasn't a high school before. So, but the teachers, the qualities of studies are not that what people are expecting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your intervention. Christian, do we have any questions from the chat that we need to bring back to the panelists?
Yes, we have one from earlier that is, hold on, I'll just find that. It is, so good evening, dear participants. My question is, how can we, in a concrete way, help the countries to implement the Safe Schools Declaration? In a conflict where the school is the target, how can we assure the security of the teachers and the students in these zones? The schools are often closed for 2, 3, even 4 years.
Thank you so much, Christian. I think maybe that the right person to answer this question could be you, Dia, when it comes to this sort of collective advice. Could I give the floor to you, even if you were in the first panel, Dia?
Yes, hello. Not such an easy question to answer, but I'll try. I think what we can do is learn a little bit from what's happened in the COVID response. That so much, really resources have been put now, not in the beginning because it was all focused on health, but some recognition that there needs to be resources for education as so many children are out of school. So I think one response would be to really draw on what's being done to put children back to school because of COVID, and ensure that children who are out of school because of conflict are incorporated into all of those programs. So that's one area. And then the second is that during the COVID response, there were so many alternative education programs developed, distance learning programs, virtual learning programs, through TV, through radio, not just through the internet. And these are the type of programs that need to be expanded and put into place on an ongoing basis, so that when there is a conflict, children who can't go back to the schools because it's not safe to do so. When we never are advising that children should go back to unsafe schools. Better to be alive and educated than to be dead, obviously. So we need to have alternatives for when it's not safe for the children to go back to school. And I think that COVID has provided some opportunities in terms of the programs that have been put in place there. So sort of as an umbrella response, because obviously every response has to be tailored to the context. But as a general kind of response, I think that's something we need to be looking at as the international community, having alternative forms of education.
Thank you so much, Dia. And I think that we've had a very enriching discussion today with many perspectives coming into discussion, both from the ground, which is really the important reason why we are here today, to solve an actual problem, but also from a government perspective, from multilateral, from regional, from organizations working directly on this issue, and from the countries that were part of initiating this idea behind the Safe Schools Declaration. I think it has shown that we have many more problems to solve, but we have also quite a few best practices and ideas to build on. And now, as we're all preparing for the conference in Abuja, I think we have work to do, going back to each of our own responsibilities, to bring in to the preparations, to communicate with the Nigerian host in order to make that conference really showing the next step of the implementation, and also to get more countries to endorse the declaration. So I really want to thank all of you for your interventions today, for being active in the discussion, and also for a chat that also shows the interest that there is for this issue. So before I pass the floor to the permanent representative of Argentina, Ambassador Federico Viegas, for closing remarks, I would again thank you for the excellent contributions, and I think that I hope that we will see many of you also participating in the Abuja conference. So please continue the discussion with each other. We can re-watch the discussion here today and see how that can make us all more knowledgeable about how to ensure good implementation of the declaration. Ambassador Villegas, you have the floor, sir.
Hello. I will put the interpretation in English. They told me that it's better to speak in English. I understand. Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for the interesting discussion we had. I thank my dear friend, the Ambassador of Norway, and the ambassadors of Nigeria and the ambassador of Spain for being the torch that we go through along since 2015, and hoping to have 104 more torches in the future. Because the first thing that we realized from this event is that this is an ongoing new social contract at the international level to realize that 3 corpus juris, 3 international law that were born in different times of history for different contexts and different goals, today are very much interrelated. So international human rights law, international humanitarian law, and international refugee law, all of them were born in different times of history for specific purposes. And now we are seeing through what we are doing today and what we might do to implement this declaration by 108 countries and probably many more in the future, is that those 3 corpus juris, they were different, but they had the same purpose, which was the protecting the rights of persons. It didn't matter, one in armed conflicts, other in peace, other when people leave their countries for persecution. And the Safe School Declaration is an example of this interpollinization of the protection of the person. We have witnessed today that, of course, we can see the glass half empty or half full, and it's half full for sure, because we are able to put education, schools, and children being protected in something that was taken for granted before, because we only had health facilities or hospitals. Now we go for more. Armed conflicts should not impact on something that is not only a human right protected, but it's also essential to recover from those conflicts. Those conflicts, in order not to happen again, they need education in societies. And those children need to not only continue their education during the conflict, and that is why we are doing this, but also the education is the only way for that conflict never to repeat itself. So we are doing something which is very important, and I thank very much for the challenges of implementation that we heard today. They were all very important, and I very much commend Nigeria for focusing on implementation for the next conference and dissemination of the importance in a continent as important as Africa. It's very meaningful to have Nigeria as the host And I think we need to more share the practical ways of implementing the declaration in our countries. So thank you very much. And I'm sorry if I can finish my comment on, this virtuality makes us go in something which is very nice, is that we have the chat while we speak or while we listen to speakers. And the chat is very interesting because not only we had questions, we have comments. And so we have some comments, for example, on the children's voice in this conference. I think that's a great challenge that we can grab for our next dissemination process and have the children's voice. And now with virtuality, we even have that advantage. We can have children from all over the world in the same event. So that's one thing. And the civil society participation, one of the last comments that I see here in the chat, definitely, we wouldn't be here if there was no civil society making us realize what is needed. That's the heart of every advance on human rights or humanitarian law or refugee law. So definitely we need to do more on implementation, continue including countries, and be innovative in disseminating this important endeavor. Thank you very much, Ambassador, and Ambassador of Spain and Nigeria, and the 104 more countries that joined us when we started this tremendous and beautiful process in 2015 in Oslo. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I think I will just leave you with Ambassador Villegas' words on how we need to join what has been said in discussion and what we see in the chat in moving forward. And let's hope that we will be many more next time we meet. So we need to go out and bring the discussion that we had today also to others to understand that at the core of a vibrant society is education, and the support of education is done through safeguarding the schools. So thank you all, thank you co-hosts, thank you speakers, enjoy your weekend, and let's continue the discussion. Thank you.
Adiós, gracias.
Gracias, thank you.